Shalom, my friends, and welcome to a special interview today, or a more conversational type of situation, you could say. I'm here with a special new friend of mine. His name is Kirk Van Buren,
That's correct.
and you may be familiar with him from some of his work, and we'll get into a lot of that today, and we'll get started. Um, so, I guess a good first question is, when did you first hear about John Bunyan or the Pilgrim's Progress?
Well, I think I first heard about it in high school. I was not a Christian, but it was compulsory for, I think, grade 12 English. So there was a time where it was compulsory reading to pass any English literature class.
Yeah, that reminds me, like growing up, like some people are pretty surprised to hear this, but the hymn, the one that goes, "Mine eyes have seen the glory,"
Yes,
the Battle Hymn of the Republic,
yes.
like that was a part of my Civil War curriculum. So I
Really?
learned that hymn
Okay,
in elementary school, public elementary school.
okay.
So that's about the closest thing I can relate in my experience, uh, like being born in '92 and going to school those years. So a lot has changed over the years, and like now it's basically like it's like if you just even brought a Bible into school, people would be like giving you a side eye type of thing. Like
Absolutely, I'm sure
it's
they would.
just like there was a kid, you know the Gadsden flag, the one that says "Don't tread on me."
Yes,
There was a child who was reprimanded for having that flag on his backpack,
I saw that.
and that flag has nothing to do with anything, like
Mm-hmm.
anything of any inappropriate nature.
Mm-mm.
They suggested or claimed that they opposed it due to its connotations of like affiliations with slavery,
Mm-hmm.
which that makes no sense,
Mm-mm.
and that's just an indication of how delicate um, people's sensibilities are now, if
Yes.
that's one way you can put it. And like there was another person who said they went to school. They went to school with a shirt that said there are two genders, and they were told that it was inappropriate and
Mm.
they couldn't wear it. And I think they're trying to go to court to resolve it, just for like not because they care, not because they think it'll work out well for them, but
Mm-hmm.
because of the principle and for the cause.
Yeah, yeah.
And so yeah, there's definitely been a major shift in the what some people call the cultural zeitgeist, the
Mm-hmm.
spirit of the age,
Mm-hmm.
and we are not the same country we were in 1950.
Not the same world.
No, and I'm not saying that 1950 was perfect, and there have been horrible things happening in every era. There
Mm-hmm.
are horrible things happening now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what happens is less horrible things, or even not horrible things, are put into the forefront by powers that be
Yes.
that eclipse the actual horrible things deliberately
Yeah.
in the in the case of the media. So you read Pilgrim's Progress. It was what grade?
So
Or
that would have been grade 12, and I don't think
you didn't really get
I,
into it.
yeah, I probably didn't, and I
Hmm.
wasn't a Christian, and I just probably didn't get it. It went over my head.
Sure. Um, okay. So when did you next pick it up? Like what transpired between then and this probably isn't the format for like a detailed
Right.
testimony, because I'm
Right.
sure we could do like a
Sure.
detailed testimony oriented video, but how did you go from, oh, I just know the book exists, to I want others to know the book exists?
Well, that happened when I had just become a Christian, and I was having trouble finding work. I was living in Canada, and a friend at my church, she knew of a man who had lived in the community where she went to college, who was a playwright.
Mm-hmm.
And she knew that in my background I had some involvement in amateur theater, and she thought it would be a great idea for me to send a resume to this fellow, and so I did. I sent a resume, and within 1 month I moved to California
And this was,
and met Jim Pappas,
yes.
and he had just, I think, read the book to his son, his 5-year-old son, putting on different voices. And at the end of reading it to his son said, "Read it again, Daddy, read it again."
And he was adding some additional elements as he read it, if I remember correctly.
I don't know that he would have done that. From what I recall, as he simplified the English
Yeah.
for his 5-year-old. But I would have,
So he was making minor non-narrative altering adjustments.
I believe so. Yeah, I believe he would
Deliberately
have.
so it would be read aloud more
Correct.
efficiently. Because
Correct.
the original text doesn't have anything like Pilgrim said, Pilgrim explained,
Right.
Bible said. Like
Right.
it's just Pilgrim colon, Bible colon, obstinate colon, etc.
Right.
And
Right.
you may not know this, but um, I talk about this in my Pilgrim's Progress collection
Okay.
video. And Bunyan was so poor that when he got married, they didn't even have a spoon between the two of them. And however, his wife's father was Christian, and there's not really much known about his actual wife, other than that her father was a Christian, and that she inherited 2 books. One was the Practice of Piety, which is exactly what it sounds like,
Okay.
and another was called The Plain Man's Pathway to Heaven, wherein every man may be able to clearly see whether he shall be damned, saved or damned, or something like that.
Okay.
And abbreviated usually to just the plain man's pathway to heaven. And that book is not one word of narrative framing or exposition, no said, nothing. The whole book is just dialogue.
Interesting.
So it's just 4 people talking about faith, heaven, hell, like morality, lust, pride, piety, and it's the conversation between a pious man, an ignorant man, an honest man, and an atheist. And you can just imagine how those 4 would talk about things.
Yes.
And you can just see that rippled into Bunyan's work.
It had to. Yeah, as you're sharing that with me.
It's so obvious.
Yes.
As soon as you hear the format, you're just like, oh, now I understand the prolonged pontificating. The whole book, Plain Man's Path Through to Heaven, is one prolonged pontification. There's no and then they went to this place. There's no framing the setting. It's just there's 4 people there and they're talking. And Bunyan's at least they're talking and walking.
Yes, yes.
So
yes.
we were comparing, Kirk and I were comparing Pilgrim's Progress to a book I was sharing with him about called, I think it's called Sir Constant Knight of the Splendid Way. And that book has much less of the, let's stop and have a long conversation type of thing. And therefore, some people, I think, with less theological interest, perhaps, or less, a certain category of people of that kind of book appeals to more. And I totally get that, but that's the subject of another thing. But I thought you might be interested to hear about that.
Yeah, that is very intriguing.
So you get acquainted with Jim, and how, it's a long journey, I imagine, from meeting Jim to being able to hand this to someone.
It actually was about a 2-year journey.
Sure.
It was back in the days when we recorded it digitally, but we transferred it onto analog tape, and that's how the editing was done. But it was definitely a lengthy process. We started recording it almost immediately, though. I arrived in May of 1986, and I think we started recording the narration of Barbara Morton would have been July of 1986.
So here we have it right here. It says 6 hours of spellbinding drama, 77 actors, original music and sound effects, Kirk Van Buren as the voice of the Pilgrim. That's you.
That's me.
So I want to hear a bit more about what drew you to theater in the first place, and just the arts, I guess you could say. Like, I know a part of that is just like it's in your soul, you know. But like, how did that start? Like, how did you get from? Was it before 12th grade that you got into it?
Hmm.
So what were the like stepping stones between I am doing like just starting to get into theatrical arts and arts in general, and I'm doing this Pilgrim's Progress. You know,
Do you want the truth?
what's the truth?
Well, the truth of the matter is, and I won't go into the details because I've alluded to it before with you in conversation, but I had a very, very dark childhood.
Yes.
I grew up in an atheist home,
Mm-hmm.
and I was, for all intents and purposes, an outcast. And I do remember being in a play in grade 2. I don't know if it was a play or if it was a skit.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember how strange it was when the skit was over. I think it was a little dance that, everyone in the class did. We were lined up. And when the audience clapped, I was I was hooked,
Okay.
because it was the first time in my life I felt any sense of
Like affirmation.
affirmation,
Sure.
love, approval, and
Sure.
I think that's where it began.
That's interesting because a lot of uh, individuals with some like poisoned childhoods, you could say, or
Hmm.
troubled youths,
Hmm.
do end up in the theatrical arts.
Yeah.
That's like some people say it's because of what happens in the industry, but you could also say it's kind of like a selection bias or something.
Yeah.
Like, because it's like a lot of these child stars, like the fame messes them up, but you
Hmm.
could also say that they might have been a bit messed up in order to even get in that place in the
Oh,
first place.
I believe for the most part,
So,
yes, absolutely.
yes, I do want to check the video briefly. All right. Excellent. All right, so that brings us back to the to Jim and getting set up to do Pilgrim's Progress, the audiobook. So, how far along had he gotten by the time you came into the picture?
Well, when I came into the picture, his original idea, because his son had such a wonderful reaction to the book, he wanted to hear it again. I believe that Jim's original idea was that he would do a simple recording and maybe use 4 people to do different voices. So it was a pretty modest dream that he had, to just record the book using 4 different people. I don't think in his mind he had envisioned much in the way of music, uh, probably no sound effects. And then when I came and joined forces with him, I saw, he had a drama ministry, a live drama ministry in the community that he lived in. And I saw what wonderful work he was doing, and I thought that his work needed to be available for more people. So I really encouraged him to think along the lines of transitioning from a live drama ministry to a media ministry.
Yes, that was the part that fascinated me the most because I'd never realized, or I never knew, that there ever was a live theatrical concept, even.
Right.
My perception, and coming from a modern angle,
Hmm.
like um, coming from someone who learned about the Seventh day Adventist Church from YouTube,
Hmm.
coming from the perspective of someone who avidly wants to like have sit down and have a stern conversation with pastors who won't not I'm just being playful, but like pastors who won't record their sermons.
Hmm.
It's things like that. Like I'll go places and like there's no media media team.
Hmm.
Like not even like a like 16-year-old with an iPhone. Nothing.
No media awareness.
like no comprehension of the fact that more people will likely view the video than will view the video the preacher in person.
Absolutely.
And that just so I totally can get where you're coming from, making this suggestion, because that's the very same kind of suggestion I would make in that position. So like, I was fascinated to learn that there ever was a in-person type of situation going on. So you make that suggestion, and was it that long before that started to be set in motion? Like he already had, I guess, some some sort of framework, but you said that it was a shorter version because of just the limitations of live action theater.
Now, when you're saying the shorter version, are you talking about the plays that he did
Yes.
prior to my coming? I do believe that he did plays that were upwards of an hour or longer.
Sure, but I mean, like, it wasn't
But
6
nothing like
hours.
this, nothing like this. No, no.
It wasn't remotely unabridged.
No, 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 no.
That's what I mean.
Yes. No, it wasn't. But his plays were original that he wrote, and
Based
very
on the
successful.
framework.
Very successful.
I imagine he still has them somewhere.
Yes, quite a few plays. I believe that he would do them in the local area where he lived, which was up in the Napa Valley, and then some in Santa Rosa at the Luther Burbank Center.
I wonder what he would think of some of the Pilgrim's Progress musicals that have come out.
That would be a good question. I don't know. You'd have to ask him. I don't know if he's aware about the musicals.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't aware until you told me.
Sure. Okay, so it was a little, like, budding theater production, I guess, and you come along and enter the picture. Were you involved in any of the theatrical productions?
We did do a few plays. Well, actually, we did one live play that he wrote, called For One Alone, The Story of Eve. And that was a really remarkable experience for me because prior to that I had only done secular plays, and it was just a really beautiful experience to be involved in a play that didn't merely entertain people, but actually educated people about the love of God. That was a phenomenal experience.
Sure. So you do that play, and then you spend some more time with Jim and his team. And
well, Jim and his team, that was us. Jim and I.
We
were the team.
Okay. So you are the team at that point. How do you go from 2 to 77?
Well, it as I said, I got there in May of 1986, and by July we had made a determination we were going to set out to record all of Pilgrim's Progress. We were going to record all of the different characters, and it was nice because we lived in a place where there was a college, so we could recruit students for different roles.
So what year was this?
1986.
Okay. So you're gathering people. Did Jim already have the equipment?
He did.
Okay.
He had quite a bit of equipment already.
So let's just really paint the picture for people listening, so people can close their eyes and they can, like, be in this house where this recording studio is.
In a house.
And they can hear, like, the, like, machines burring, and they can see, like, just help give people that image.
Okay. Well, I do remember we did it in a room that he had just built upstairs, and he set up, I think he had like a recording booth, because you do need a certain atmosphere to get good quality sound. And so there was a recording booth where the person who was, in this case it was Barbara Morton, she was sitting there in front of a microphone with a script, reading all of the narration. And the reason we started with her, I mean, it's a good place to start anyway, and we found out, sadly, within a few weeks of determining that she would be the narrator of the production, she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So we had to make sure to get her recording done first.
Wow.
And the sad thing is that she died, I believe it was February 14th of the following year.
After having recorded everything.
Right, right.
So she's the one who um, says, like, as I walked.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
She did a beautiful job of narrating it.
Yeah, so, like, as I walked through, I just want to give more context
Right.
to the camera.
Well, I think it starts off with,
As I walked through the wilderness world, I lighted upon a certain place
yes,
where was a den.
yes, there it is.
And I laid down there.
Laid
to
myself
sleep.
down to sleep.
Yeah, sure.
And I
sure.
dreamed a dream.
And I dreamed a dream. So
Yes.
she's the one who speaks that portion.
Yes,
and
yes.
then other portions come
Yes.
out. Was someone else taking upon that role in the subsequent recording?
In the subsequent recording, it was another gentleman that did it.
Sure.
I originally, I think Jim envisioned a male to be the narrator of the first part of Pilgrim's Progress, but because there were so many male parts, I suggested it would be better to have a female.
That's
just for the landscape of the production, to have variety.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Because it seems, intuitive to choose a male given that Bunyan is the author.
Right.
But it's not necessary. It's not a requirement. Okay. So
well, and I also thought the element of most children grow up with their mother reading stories. And so I thought that would be a beautiful element.
Sure, that makes sense. So she gets in there. She does her recording. You mentioned before how like there was just if it was raining, you might hear that. You might hear like cars driving by or airplanes,
toilets flushing.
So it was just like
children running up and down the steps.
A whole like hullabaloo.
It was. I want to say Jim's children. He had 3 children at the time. The youngest was probably, I think the youngest was maybe 2 years old. And so the children were amazing when you consider it. They lived in a home where their dad is doing a lot of recording with a lot of different people. And so for the most part, the kids were amazing. But we often used to think that maybe sometimes the angels kind of spread their wings and added a little bit of soundproofing while we were recording.
Yeah.
But it made it challenging for the editing, to edit out the toilet flushes,
of course.
Edit out the airplanes, edit out the door slams.
You don't want all those anachronisms.
No.
Sure. Okay, so that gives us a taste of, or a glimpse of what it was like recording. And then, were there some technical qualities? Here's a taste of what it's like recording here. If the camera picks it up, it might not, because the microphones are advanced. But
the car driving by, you mean? Yes.
Yeah. The question I was going to say is, when we talked before, you emphasized the editing process and how times have changed since then.
Yes.
But before we get into the editing, I want to inquire as to if there were technical processes and tools, or just like what might a modern listener might not have even been alive in '86 not grasp about recording audio in 1986. Like, I'm just thinking now, like, this means you actually had to put in physical tapes.
Yes.
And like put that physical object into the little spot it goes in, close it, hit record, and then take that out when it ran out. Time things so that they don't cut off randomly.
Yes.
So there was a whole factor of like, I looked at this phone, for example, and I'm like, okay, I've got like 20 gigs free. Now I can calculate approximately how much video time that goes. So you had to do the same kind of thing, except with the tape.
Correct.
And you could physically see the tape itself going to the side, so you could actually get a visual indication of when it's going to end.
Yeah, it was a little different, however. I mean, I think we were just, digital recording was just coming out. As a matter of fact, the recorder that I believe we used was called the DAT. I think it was DAT.
Okay.
And
digital audio.
Yeah, I can't remember what it all stood for, but I do believe we had quite a bit of time. So the reason we did that is so that we would have the ability, I'm actually rethinking this. I think it might have been that we did record reel to reel. That's
Really?
how we did the
Really?
actual recording, and then we dumped it on to the
Wow.
digital so that we would only lose one generation because the digital was going to preserve the quality.
Sure.
So
Because the
that is
reels would deteriorate.
correct, correct. So I believe that's what we originally did, and then it was kind of crazy, but when someone would come and do the recording, well, I can tell you all kinds of interesting things, but there are scenes where you think all of the people were recorded together,
But it was
but a
spliced.
lot of those people never met each other.
Sure, sure.
And so, for example, the scene with piety, prudence, and charity, those ladies never met each other.
Okay.
They came in,
From the
and it
school.
was just hard to orchestrate people's schedules, and
Yeah, yeah.
so
That's how
that
life
made it
is.
really difficult. So one of the ladies would come in, and Jim and I would have her record, and we usually would have them do about 4 takes of each sentence that they were going to say. And then after they left, then I would log in a script, take 1, take 2, take 3, take 4.
Yes, yeah.
So I would have, so it was very tedious.
And then you, as a artistically oriented individual, would very, contemplatively listen to each take
Correct.
and then compare them to the other takes.
Yes.
And not only find which one is best, but which one is most compatible,
Right.
and all of those considerations.
Yes.
So yeah, and you were cutting physical tape in this case.
Correct.
And how would you even attach it? How do you do that?
Well, how we did it originally, how we did it is the ladies would record, I would log in the book, which was the best. And in some cases where you're having a paragraph, maybe the lady is saying 4 different sentences in a paragraph. Sometimes the first part of the first sentence, maybe take 4, was the best. So I would actually use
Wow.
that piece.
You'd slice up sentences.
I would slice up, I would take the very best of what they gave, and I would put it together, the very best of what they gave.
Yeah.
Because do remember, we weren't dealing with professionals. We were dealing with, for the most part, just a bunch of people who wanted to be involved in this project and really wanted to communicate the love of God as Bunyan did through this incredible story. So,
Were they all? You might not know. You don't know everyone's heart, obviously, but were these all like mostly or entirely professing Christians?
I believe so. Yeah, nearly everyone,
Yeah.
I think was, and of course you have different degrees of profession,
Sure, sure,
Sure. And
sure.
most of them were students. We used a lot of students
But
that were attending the college.
the point of the question, though, is it wasn't just like some guy off the street looking
No,
for a quick buck.
no.
Yeah.
Now, every now and again, Jim might encounter someone in the little town that he lived in that had a really unique voice, and maybe not necessarily a Christian, but he would recruit them to come and usually just record one or two
For like.
one or two sentences just
Sure.
to have the variety.
Yeah, yeah. It takes quite the commitment to get to 77 voice actors.
Absolutely.
So.
And I remember the one line where Christian has just exited out of the valley of the shadow of death, and he goes by the cave, and in the cave there's 2 giants, one named Pope and one named Pagan. And I do believe the guy that did the voice for Pope, he wasn't a Christian. He was just someone that lived in the community and had a voice that he thought was unique.
Yes. So I think we might have skipped over something kind of critical.
Okay.
It will likely be in the title of the video anyway,
Okay.
but for the sake of the conversation, I don't think we really addressed the role that you played in this. Like you're clearly involved in editing, but did we even mention what roles you were voice acting? I don't think we mentioned that.
We didn't, I guess. Well, I think you did when you read the back of the jacket.
Oh yeah.
Yes, that I did the part of
Yes,
Christian.
that's correct.
But it was the least of what I did.
Yeah.
It was the least of what I did. That was the easy part
Sure.
of doing Christian. But I also did some other voices, just small voices wherever we maybe could. It's really difficult when you have many of the voices are just like one line.
Yeah.
So and it's hard to find uh, people for just to. It's time consuming to have people come in and just record one sentence.
Yeah. It's a whole different world. I was telling you the other day about the website Fiverr,
Mm-hmm.
where we literally could go, like, if I went back with you tonight to where you're sleeping, and like in the, I don't know, let's just say, like, hypothetically, tomorrow we spend a few hours on the internet,
Mm-hmm.
we could find 77 actors tomorrow on Fiverr,
Mm-hmm.
just that one
Isn't
website.
that crazy?
And it wouldn't be like you had to pay them,
Mm-hmm.
but it wouldn't be that pricey
Mm-hmm.
because of how many there are in the competitive market.
Mm-hmm.
And like you could definitely find some excellent ones, and like they'd be pricier, but you just
Mm-hmm.
get a few excellent ones and then
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of other ones for
Mm-hmm.
variety.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be a whole different project trying to do it now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that you can hear time,
Mm-hmm.
and this sounds strange,
Mm-hmm.
but like I do not think you can make the 1979 Pilgrim's Progress movie today,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't, because like the thing that makes the movie is that it's people from 1979, and you don't have any people from 1979 today, because in this, what I mean by that is everyone today is from 2023.
Right.
Like, even if they were born in 79 or were there in 79, they're not in 79.
Correct.
And the only way that movie can be made is with people in 79. So I don't think you can make what was made again, because it requires people from 86. And
Yes.
there's a charm to that that's not that should not be overlooked. If you follow
Is,
what I'm
is
saying.
it? Yes, I do. Is it a charm or is it the technology? But I think it could be a
Both.
combination
It's
of
both.
both.
The technology is part of what makes it charming. Um, I just want to cover that Bible.
Yeah. We have a little bit of rain here. It's a beautiful Bible.
So, speaking of the Bibles, um, the verse that Bunyan puts on his title page is Hosea. I think maybe 14 is the number that comes to mind, but uh, he quotes just the portion of the verse that says, "I have used similitudes,"
Mm.
and that's probably the main verse that comes to mind for me
Mm-hmm.
when I think of Pilgrim's Progress.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if there's a certain Bible verse that comes to your mind when you think of the Pilgrim's Progress, whether it be the allegorical element or whether it be the thematical elements. Like, what stands out to you the most, whether it be a verse that's used in the book?
Well, that's a hard one because it's
You could say a few.
yeah. I'm just
I was just thinking, like, what's the first one you think of?
well. If I'd had a little bit more sleep last night, I might have been able. Because that's actually a huge question, and I've never stopped to think about it. Is there a scripture that alludes to the journey that we're all on? That it is a journey, and I can't think of one because that's what I would want to reach out and grab onto. I guess I guess I would think, it doesn't necessarily fit, or maybe any scripture can fit, but Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the thoughts I think towards you, says the Lord, thoughts of good, not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. And I mean, you have Christian leaving the city of destruction, and look at how the Lord intercepts Christian's life.
Yeah.
He sends evangelists, and evangelist points the way, the way of happiness, the way of joy, the only way of happiness that we can have in this earth. So I don't know, that's probably not the best answer, but there's so many
Sure. And this
scriptures.
was a, like, impromptu
Yes,
question,
yes.
so
You didn't give me my my homework assignment in advance.
It reminds me of those celebrities who have to get like their list of questions like
Oh.
approved before they're ever interviewed.
Yes, yes.
Um, I didn't talk to your agent.
No,
before
no. Well, there is no agent. Talk to Jesus.
Yeah. Okay. So, for
So,
someone who's never heard of the Pilgrim's Progress and is watching this video, why should they read it
or listen to it,
or listen to
or
it?
listen to it. I think people would be amazed, Christian and non-Christians, how it parallels everyone's life on this earth.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that really shocked me was my mother, who was an atheist, actually listened
Mm-hmm.
to the production, but
Yeah.
I think she only listened because
You were in it.
I was in it.
Sure, but she did listen.
But
She didn't refuse.
no,
If
and
it
that
was
was,
if it was an audio Bible, she might have refused.
oh, totally. Or if it was a sermon, but because it was a story.
See,
And that's why I think a lot of people, this is communicating the gospel in a format that most people would be more open to, because it is a story.
yeah,
It does have sound effects and music and
I
characters.
I think it's generally widely agreed amongst scholars and opinionated men and women of the world that the Pilgrim's Progress is the greatest allegory ever written in the English language.
Absolutely.
There's one written in a non-English language called The Labyrinth of the World, which I brought
Okay.
with me. I'd like to show you later. But as far as English goes, there's no real contest.
Hmm.
Interestingly, in Fox's Book of Martyrs, it writes about um, the book The Holy War,
Hmm.
which is another allegory by Bunyan.
Hmm.
How familiar? We just talked about it.
Yeah, the only familiarity I have with it, I picked up a copy, I looked at it.
Yeah.
I do believe Jim wanted also to do that.
Yeah, he started it.
Oh, he did? Okay.
But, well, yeah.
To be continued, I guess.
That I don't know if I was supposed to disclose that, but he's.
You can edit that.
Yeah, yeah. At any rate, the Holy War in the Fox's Book of Martyrs, it says, had the Pilgrim's Progress not been written, the Holy War would be the finest allegory ever written in the English language.
Interesting.
So, like, it's so good
Hmm.
that the only thing that could knock it out of its top place is the Pilgrim's Progress.
Wow.
Which shows you how good the Pilgrim's Progress is. And what it goes on to say, if I remember correctly, is what the Pilgrim's Progress has going for it that the Holy War does not, is that it is so easy to pick up and read and keep reading and follow.
Hmm.
Whereas the Holy War is much more daunting,
Hmm.
much more technical. Technical is not the word I'm really looking for, but much more, like, for example, in the Bible, there's a portion that calls the two of the apostles Boanerges,
Mm.
the sons of thunder.
Okay.
And that's an obscure reference, right?
Totally.
And like that's just like name dropped in Holy War, like with
Mhm.
no context, like no explanation, and you're
Mhm.
just supposed to like know what it's talking
Mhm.
about
Mhm.
and like get something from that
Mhm.
usage.
Mhm.
And like that sort of stuff doesn't happen so much in Pilgrim's Progress.
Mhm.
It's much more like uh, digestible, much more.
User friendly.
It's within
Relatable? Would it be more relatable?
Yeah,
Because
it's within reach.
absolutely.
And like the Holy War is hard for just people in general.
Mhm.
Like the most scholarly of men are intimidated or like have to persevere
Mhm.
to achieve completing the Holy War.
Mhm.
And as enthusiastic as I am about it, I've yet to complete it. The only reason that I have any sort of familiarity with it beyond a surface level is because of audiobooks,
Okay.
which an amazing one was done by, um, it's available on Audible,
Okay.
uh, but, and other places. But what's not what I hope, yeah, so I could say more about the Holy War. But the point is that Pilgrim's Progress is incredible. And if you want to hear some quotes, I don't have them memorized, but I can paraphrase some of them. But the full quotes are in my Pilgrim's Progress collection video. which I mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
because one of my favorite authors, she emphasizes just how influential Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress was, and she writes that in Bedford jail he breathed the very atmosphere of heaven.
Mhm.
And she also writes that something like tens of thousands of individuals have been led to, salvation through the instrumentality of the Pilgrim's Progress,
Yes. And amazing.
and Grace Abounding to the Chief of Sinners,
Mhm.
which is Bunyan's autobiography,
Yes.
which would be another thing to be a fascinating um, audiobook, because
Wouldn't it be? It would be.
um, I just imagine the part. It's hard to like not go on tangents with this subject, but in Grace Abounding to the Chief of Sinners, there's a moment in Bunyan's life where he's playing this like old vintage European form of like baseball, basically.
Okay.
And he's like playing the game, and he's like his reputation is like he's such a foul mouth that the prostitutes are like cringing at his profanity. He was very vulgar,
Yeah.
and he was like, he's like he called himself like the chief of sinners, just like Paul
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
And he's playing this game,
Mhm.
and he hears this voice, and it's like so, and he hears this voice, and it gives him this impression saying, like, will you forsake your sins and go to heaven, or keep your sins and go to hell?
Whoa.
And he's just like, oh. And that was a real critical moment in his
Mhm.
life, as you can imagine.
Mhm.
Like, you
Mhm.
don't just like have a experience like that and hopefully you don't, because you could harden your heart, of course.
Mhm.
But if you don't, then you're going to move a certain direction and
Mhm.
like adjust your life accordingly. And it's fascinating. It's really fascinating. Um,
If you don't mind my interjecting, just that very belief system that Bunyan had about going to hell. We had a time when we were
yes,
recording.
yes.
Do you mind if I?
Please, please. I
So
wanted
we,
to ask you about this sort of
yeah,
stuff.
we had a time when we were recording. We had new equipment. Everything was in order, and all of a sudden the equipment stopped. It just stopped for no reason, and I think we wound up having to. We weren't able to record for about a week.
Wow.
The equipment would not work, and I was a pretty new Christian. And as I thought about it, I thought, I don't really like what is being said in the part of the script that we were recording. And it was where Bunyan is going through the valley of the shadow of death. And Bunyan clearly believed in hell, in a place where people go and they're tormented and tortured. And when I mentioned that to Jim, he thought that, yeah, that probably makes sense. So Jim rewrote the script for that section, and as soon as it was rewritten and we sat down in front of the microphone and turned the recorder on, everything worked just fine.
That's
It just
that's
locked up.
that's marvelous. You can really just marvel at how small things like that can happen and have massive ripple effects, because that means that all the thousands of people who've listened to it were not being influenced by that concept,
Absolutely.
and that's a huge deal.
Absolutely.
Um, were there other moments of um, significance you'd like to share?
Well, that was one of the most remarkable, I thought, but we
I'm sure you
often
could spend hours saying it.
well, we often thought we should have kept a diary
Yeah,
of the things that happened
so
during the
much happened.
recording,
Hmm.
and it would have been probably something we could have released
Made a
because
little
it,
documentary.
yeah, well, or even just a little book, the
Sure.
story behind the making of Pilgrim's Progress, and of
That's kind
course,
of what this is.
yeah, it is. I mean, and typically,
But you're saying there could have been a more fleshed out.
oh yes, yes. I mean, I even remember when it was all completed. We actually finally completed the final edit was on Halloween night. 1988. And we had had so much difficulty when we came down to the wire to get it done. And so during that 2-year period, you have all these people believing in what you're doing. There's many people were making financial contributions, and we were constantly faced with how much longer, when will it be done, when will it be done? And we would say, well, it would be done in a month, in 2 months. We didn't know.
Yeah.
But finally we got to the place where we were in the final stretch, but we had purchased, and it was new at the time. Jim had purchased some, I can't remember, I think it was put out by Mac Computer, and it was a way to do digital editing, not editing, mixing.
Yeah.
And so while we played the tape, we actually were able to mix things on the mixing board, and it would remember every move you made on the mixing board. Well, it was malfunctioning.
Okay.
You know, it malfunctioned quite a few times.
Sure.
But finally, you know, October 31,
Okay.
1988, we finally got it done, and we just felt like Satan was busy elsewhere. He had, you know, so finally we got the victory.
All those witches summoning demons had no idea they were calling them off this task of interfering with your work.
Yes, but what a night to complete it.
Those witch covens saved the Pilgrim's Progress production.
Yes, so that was a significant moment. But then, so then we have it done. Well, we don't have any money to produce it, to duplicate it, to promote it. And I remember one evening coming home, and an anonymous person, I had donated $10,000.
Wow.
And of course that was a night of celebration for all of us. And so that is what allowed Pilgrim's Progress to be distributed to many people.
I think the stars in their crown in heaven, you know, the Lord will that they make it there, will be blinding because the ripple of that work and that contribution is, you know, immeasurable by human calculation.
And imagine what it's going to be like for John Bunyan.
Oh yes, I've
imagine,
thought about this. I've
most
thought about
of all,
this.
For him to find out.
I look forward to meeting him.
To find out that there were many movies made, many recordings made,
musicals,
and the people that will go up to him and say, "It's because of you I'm here."
Yes.
And oh, by the way, there's these other people that helped to do your work
Here's
as
the
well.
song we made based on your work.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that will be just amazing, won't it?
Oh, absolutely. He can meet all the other allegory writers throughout history that make
because I'm sure he had no idea at all. And from what I understand, and
he would never have written it probably if he wasn't in prison. That's also true.
Right. And I learned recently that his wife, well, back in those days when you were put in prison, you actually had to pay for your own food. You had to pay your way.
He had to sell things. He had to make stuff.
And so his wife would show up at the jail, and she would get pages of manuscripts from him, and that's how he funded staying in jail. And I think the first time he was in jail for 12 years.
He also made shoelaces or something.
Okay. Well, his father, was he a tinker? Was that
his father was a tinker, and therefore he was a tinker. I mean, he made shoelaces in jail in addition to his other work. He was trying to feed his family too, and himself, I guess.
Just amazing. I think I read a statement recently that he would allow moss to grow between his eyelids rather than I don't think this was a word that was used, but rather than recant. There was no way.
They said that they'd let him go, like repeatedly. They told him you can leave, and he said, if you let me go, I'll preach tomorrow. And they're like, okay, then don't leave.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? Be like, you could leave if you just promise not to preach. And he's like, if you let me go, I'll preach tomorrow. Let me go today, I'll preach tomorrow. And they're like, okay, you're staying here.
You know, we owe so much to him, not only for Pilgrim's Progress, but for the stand that he took on freedom of conscience.
Yeah, because he was, absolutely. Because for those who don't know, he was preaching without a license. The Church of England at the time required all preachers to be approved and preach in harmony with the Book of Common Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were preaching a independent, unlicensed message, then you would be confronted by the authorities. And Bunyan himself was like, I noticed something about the licensed preachers. They don't preach with power.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and I think there's some interesting parallels in some areas today. And
Yes, there are.
it's a sad reality that things, history repeats itself, but the good parts of history repeat themselves as well. And it's like a pendulum. It swings,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the pendulum swung really far in one direction, and I think we're about to swing really fast in the opposite
Yes,
direction.
yes,
I think
indeed.
that's where we're at in history, and I think we'll see a lot of really fascinating things. So,
I believe we will.
do you have any final thoughts or appeals?
Well, I think people find, whenever I meet people, and it's rare for me to, as I've told you before, it's rare for me to actually meet people that even know about
Oh yeah,
this recording. And I'm always taken aback. I'm always surprised. I might meet one or two people maximum every year at the most. And I'm always surprised that they know about it. And one thing that's very unusual is after Barbara Morton recorded all her narration, we transferred it onto digital tape, and then as I needed it, we would dump it back onto the reel to reel
hmm
kind of. I guess it's not called 8-track. I can't remember the name for it.
Sure.
But anyway, so we would dump it back on. But there was one narration where three important words, were accidentally erased off of her narration, off of the original
Yeah.
digital recording. And it was like, what are you going to do? You can't call her back in to
Has she
re-record. She had already died.
Yeah.
And I mean, typically, if I accidentally erased something that you had recorded,
Sure.
I would just call you back. Well, in this case, what I had to do is I had to go through all of her narration,
You cut the words out.
fishing for those words,
That's what I
to
was gonna
piece
say.
together like the last
Yeah.
words of the
Like
sentence.
if I died, you could just go to my YouTube videos and grab stuff.
Yes,
But so you did that in the old-fashioned way.
yes, and it was, and I mean, I know where it is and I hear it, and of course it sounded so obvious to me that, oh, it doesn't sound right, but I don't think anyone's ever noticed it.
I've never noticed something like that.
Well, do you want me to tell you where it is? No, probably not. Anyway, if you ever want to know, I'll tell you.
Sure.
But I'm always amazed when I hear it. I go, wow.
You made it happen.
Yeah.
By God's grace.
Yes.
He provided.
Yes, absolutely.
So God provides. God is good.
Totally. And, I guess the other thing I would say is, if you have a vision for God, just trust that God will provide, especially if it's something that is for His honor and glory. And I mean, during the time Pilgrim's Progress was done,
Yeah.
I was as poor as a church mouse.
Yeah.
I lived in a little tar paper shack,
Uh-huh.
in a little room with, it was literally a little shack with a single bed, a hot plate, and a toilet and a shower.
Yeah.
No insulation in the walls. It was
Mhm.
cold.
Yeah. There's a quote I like that reads, "All God's biddings are enablings,"
Yes.
and they are, because every instruction that God gives you, such as like go ye out into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, is a promise to make it possible.
Absolutely.
He will not tell you to do anything He does not promise to make achievable.
Absolutely.
So please, for those viewing, please consider exploring the Pilgrim's Progress. There's a sample here on this YouTube channel, and there's we hope to have the book, the audiobook and physical book available at openthearmory.org and whatever future website we're working on in development. That website at the time of this recording is currently down, so you can comment or contact me in some way, and I think there's also orionsgate.org if you want to just order directly.
Mm.
And you're welcome to tell them that we sent you, and just thank you for watching, and I hope to see more comments of people's experiences with the Book of Pilgrim's Progress. So thank you, and shalom.
Shalom.